Good. Good evening, everyone. Today is April 15th. I'm going to call the meeting to order at 6 p.m. Next, we'll do the approval of the agenda. Motion is that the agenda for the council meeting of Monday, April 15th, 2024 be approved as presented. Can I have a mover and seconder? Councillor Connell, Councillor Young. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. 3 is declaration of interest. Are there any declarations, teams? Okay. Plus, I'd like to welcome Craig Warden and Gordon Kidden as our guests tonight, and the 2 people following online. 4 is presentations. There are none. No delegations under 5. 6.1 is approval of the council minutes. Motion reads that council minutes dated April 2nd, 2024 be accepted as presented. Mover and seconder, Councillor Burton, Councillor Campbell. Any discussion on the previous minutes? The glasses? Seeing none, I'll call the question.
My old ones.
I'll call the question. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. There are no communications and petitions tonight. And 8.1 is consent reports. We have information package. Is there anything anyone would like to see me pull from the information package? All right. So the recommended motion reads that all items listed under the consent report section of the agenda be accepted as presented. Moved by Councillor Vodka, seconded by Councillor Kirkby. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. No committee reports this evening. 10 is mayor. I got a few things that happened around town the last 2 weeks. One, we did the 1-year anniversary of Subway. So congratulations to them. That was a great event. Too bad it was raining, but it was a good turnout for that. We had the eclipse last week, which was quite phenomenal, really, and a good way to show off our town. I think we had some estimates were between 3,000 and 5,000 people in town. So it went pretty smoothly. Is there a few things we could have done different? Sure. In hindsight, but you just didn't know where people were going to come from and how they were going to get here. So I think overall the OPP did a great job. The fire department was on call. Our staff was on call with putting out barriers and everything. So I thought it was a great day, and it was being in that path of totality was excellent. When it went all dark, it was pretty cool. There was a JSC meeting last week as well. I attended the Leeds and Grenville Small Business Enterprise Center's Starter Company Awards. There were 2 local companies, Katarina's, Nicole Judson, and River Vibes Picnics, Yvonne Jodwin. They were both they both graduated and received awards. Actually, River Vibes Picnics is going to be in the lighthouse this year, so that will be very good. We had a wastewater management meeting last week, which we're going to discuss a bit more today. Mallorytown had a mayor's breakfast. I attended that. There was actually 8 local mayors at that one, and they included like a business of the year and new business of the year. And I was telling somebody, I think that they had 10 nominations. So this is my plea for everybody. If you've got a citizen of the year, volunteer of the year, or business of the year, send in an application or a recommendation. And last, we had that model train and toy show on Saturday. And wow, what a response. I know Councillor Young had a booth there, and she had her grandfather's train, which was very, very cool. I was like a little kid in a candy store, I hate to, I hope my wife's not watching because I got all the stuff hidden at the office, But it was a lot of fun, and seeing the little kids enjoying it, and big kids acting like little kids. There was some displays bigger than this room, which was just amazing. And my hat's off to Stuart Reed. This was his baby, and he looked like he hadn't slept in weeks, but he was pretty proud, and as we all were, because it really, again, it showcased our town for 1,500 people, maybe a bit more, 2,000 people that came one day. And I know I'd love to have Stuart come back and I'll ask him to do that, come and do a presentation to council, because he was thinking early on that morning that he would have between $5,000 and $6,000 to donate to the food bank.
Wow.
One day. So, you know, hats off to Mr. Reed. That's a great job. That's it for me. I'm going to go around the room. We'll start on my left here with Councillor Lockett.
You've covered everything that I attended as well.
Sorry, I made sure.
It's okay.
You're good?
I'm good.
Councillor McConnell?
Thank you, Mayor Shankar. Unfortunately, the one meeting that I had scheduled in the past 2 weeks, I wasn't unable to make because of one day a year that I am occupied. Happened to be that night. So I couldn't attend the meeting, but in reading what's in tonight's council agenda and figuring out what was going on before then from what I read in the newspaper, it's very, very exciting, very interesting, and I'll be looking forward to discussing it. As far as the trains go, I intended to make it down there, but didn't. But it's something that you personally might find interesting, since you may have accumulated some train stuff. When I was in the antique business, trains were a big thing. And very often when somebody divested themselves of the train set, whether by death or whatever, you would have the entire front of the auction hall with tables, and they would have cars on them. And it would be so much a piece, take whatever you want. And sometimes they'd go for over $100, and somebody would go up and take one. And this would go on for a long time. When I was closing my business a few years ago, though, it was generally speaking older folks that always wanted to train, but didn't have them when they were a kid. And then when they got older and had a basement or whatever, these people were getting older, selling their homes, and it got to the point where you would still have the tables, but the prices for one piece were about half of what they were. And you could actually put a really good, they were selling them by boxes. So my point in saying this is, if there's anybody out there that wants to get into trains, now is the time to do it, because they are far more affordable than they ever were. And it's a really great thing. If you see a setup, you probably remember Harry Beckstead, that used to be the principal of Central Public School. Some of you might. He had a tremendous layout in his basement that he had trouble getting rid of when he got older, because nobody wanted it, you know.
Didn't Norm Fortune have one downtown?
Yes.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, they used to do it at Boomers, before it was Boomers. I think they had a few in there. But yeah, it's a great time to get into it because of the cost of the used pieces.
There was quite a few vendors, like 70 vendors, and I didn't find the costs too outrageous. You know, they seemed pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Young?
Thank you, Mayor Shankar. April 9th, I attended the Walker House Board of Management meeting. They've got lots going on there. They have their own eclipse viewing there. They recently had a bus trip to the National Art Gallery that was really well attended. And they've just got workshops and story swaps, a lot going on down there. So I would encourage anyone that's not a member to think about joining, because there's lots to do there. We also had a BIA meeting on April the 9th with Councillor Lockett was there too. And great feedback from the eclipse. The restaurants were packed. And our academic department has a restaurant rack card now, so that's really convenient to hand out to everybody. This is Tourism Week, April 15th to 19th. So check out the Explore Prescott site. And South Bramble Field of Fine Art, their art show is coming up on April the 26th, the 28th at the Legion. That's all for me.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Burton.
Thank you. Great to see the model trains. My dad was actually an enthusiast years ago. So we had the big table downstairs and all the little people in the trees, and everything. So it was great to see that people are actually still into it. And I have a library meeting tomorrow night at 6. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Just the solar eclipse, it just filled me with delight to see how many people came to Prescott, and they came like at 10 in the morning, and they're throwing frisbees in the park and running around and using the play structures. And so it was great to see our town so happy and filled with happy people. Nice. I attended the Emergency Management Committee meeting on April 5th. We talked about the solar eclipse and how to get ready for that. Actually, they closed the 416 at Kempville after a while. Yeah, it was just,
Like southbound?
yeah, just people couldn't get down. So we're talking about our annual exercise, to be held in September or October of this year. For public education, it's Emergency Preparedness Week, May 5th to 11th coming up. And we're going to have public awareness and education plans, seasonal campaign dates. And I also attended the train show. It's very cool. I have a dollhouse. I'm into all these miniatures, and it's just, the trains are just, little dogs with some cats. It's just amazing. Glad to see so many people again in Prescott.
Thank you. Councillor.
Get through you, Mayor Shankar. I attended the wastewater treatment meeting. Obviously, we're going to talk more about that tonight. We had some friends in attendance from Augusta, so like Councillor McConnell said, we'll get more into that. I did also attend the train event, and I thought, wow, what a great turnout. I also was at the eclipse, and I thought it was great to see people out. The businesses did well. Right? I drove through town, it took a little extra, but the town, we didn't have to spend a lot of money. They also had the Leo Boyven Community Center open for use for the washroom. Unfortunately, the fort wasn't, but it was good to see people come, and it didn't cost us a lot, and they did business in Prescott. Another thing that I attended on the weekend was the Prescott figure skating competition. I think there was over 500 people, skaters maybe there. Our own director and clerk over here, Lindsay Velkamp, helped run that. So congratulations on the great success, right? I know when I went there was a ton of smiling people, and there was clubs from Kingston, Kempville, Gananoque, Athens, so just another example of bringing people into Prescott through different methods. And all volunteer led, right? So you had Stu, you got the Prescott Figure Skating Club, you've got Grenville Minor Hockey, the Leo Boyven Showcase. There's just so much opportunity to bring people here, and it doesn't all have to be done by the town, which is great to see. So I wanted to make a point, but it slipped my mind, and I guess I know what you feel like at times, Councillor McConnell, because I thought I had a good point, and slipped my mind, and be sitting across from me is wearing off here, but anyways, I'll pass it off and leave it there. My hair might be too tight tonight. Thank you.
You want to retort that?
Oh, it's not a retort. A couple things I meant to say and forgot about the eclipse. But you said you were at the eclipse.
Well, I mean, we were all.
No, what I was gonna say is, I was downtown in the morning, and I was stunned with the number of people we had wandering around in town in the morning before it. And we actually had a perfect view from our deck. So that's, we watched it, and when that ring appeared, the roar that went up, that I heard on James Street from the riverfront and the Fort Field was astounding. I've never heard anything.
We heard it on Massey too, just to be clear, and we did it. We were roaring on Massey. So.
Yeah. And the last thing I was mentioning is when I walked the dog the next morning, I was really impressed with the lack of garbage.
Right.
Agreed.
It was very clean. Centennial Park was clean. East of the marina was clean. I didn't see anything in the Fort Field. So I don't know whether these people were really conscientious or our people were in attendance, but I was very, very impressed with the cleanliness after this all happened for the amount of people.
Yeah.
And there were thousands.
That was good.
Well said.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. One thing that I forgot to mention, we had a very prominent person of Prescott, a philanthropist, a businessman, a family person, Gus Burney passed away this week. So our deepest condolences to the Burney family. And, you know, I don't think there's a person in Prescott that wouldn't know Gus Burney or have a story about Gus Burney, you know, a very kind man, a very generous man, a good man and well-known throughout the town. So it's going to be a big loss to our town to lose that. And you know, I give it up to his boys and Solange to have you know, our condolences. Thank you.
The little dealer with the big heart.
Yeah, I remember that quote. That was their logo, right?
Gus used to live with,
Oh, really?
when Roy Doyle used to own Riverside,
Yeah.
Roy Doyle used to own Riverside in partnership with Tom Bernier from Broadpool. And it was sold to Gus Burney and his partner, George Sanders at the time. Gus bought him out, but Gus was traveling back and forth from Ottawa and had so many tickets, he lost his license. So he was paying a guy to drive him back and forth and stay at the garage all day. And meanwhile, I bought my house for my mom and I was living there by myself. And I said, well, look, they want to move into the spare room, you know, because it was only 30 days or 60 days or something, feel free. But I was dating at the time. So Gus used to wait in the bushes until the place cleared out. And anyway, it was a joke with us as long as Gus was alive, you know, and he was a great guy.
I'm sure they'll have a family event, hopefully at the golf course or something.
It might need to be bigger. Hey, it might need to be bigger.
All right, we're going to move on to our staff reports. 12.1 is staff report 29-2024, Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. This is a report from information only, and it's from Matthew Armstrong. So Matthew.
Thank you very much. So wanted to kind of bring this back around. I think there were some questions when you took a look at the strategic plan as to what exactly the community safety and wellbeing plan was. And in relation to priority 2, objective 3, strategy A1 is being proactive in utilizing the community safety and wellbeing plan. So it was created a couple of years ago in concert with the other municipalities. And then from there, we created an actual action plan that came out of that, specific to Prescott. So there's kind of 3 major objective areas, and that's being community development, working mostly collaboration with partners, poverty, unemployment, transportation, housing, homelessness, youth, seniors, that sort of thing. Next is population health, including physical health, mental health, and substance abuse. And then third is domestic violence, victims of violence and human trafficking. So a lot of the items that are in there, we have either started on, actually completed, are full participants, or are yet to be fully realized. So just want to provide some context around what the plan was, what our action plan is. Then every 4 months, we will be reporting on how we're making progress on those items. So not going to kind of go into anything from there, but more than happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Armstrong? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Armstrong. So every 4 months, you're going to give us an update on that?
As part of the strategic plan update, then we'll have a subset for this as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Moving on then to 12.2 is staff report 30-2024, the 2024 capital and operating projects budget from our CAO and treasurer, Mr. Armstrong. I'm going to read the recommendation. The council approves the 2024 capital and operating projects as outlined in staff report 30-2024. Can I have a mover and seconder just for discussion? Councillor Kirkby, Councillor Burton. Floor is yours, Mr. Armstrong.
Thank you very much. So we started developing the project budget back in November. Between November and January, staff and council developed and submitted their projects. Also in November, we took a look at the key infrastructure projects and approved two of them moving forward, which was the dock and the work on the wastewater treatment plant filter. So those two are, moving forward. We're happy to say that the dock is here and is being installed, and that's looking great and then well within the timeframe that we were looking for. On January 15th of 2024, council reviewed the initial project list and then identifying top priorities. So then again on February 26th, brought the list back on the prioritized side, had a discussion at council. And then just this past meeting on April 2nd, we went through the strategic plan, and a lot of those projects aligned with various points in the strategic plan. So just bring it back to this evening for consideration, seeing if there's any other changes. But really it's very similar, or it's exactly the same as what we discussed in February, and didn't receive kind of any feedback from that. Total of 1.323 million is the projects for this year. And then total contributions to reserve are 1.6 million. And then one subtracted 1.5. You'll notice that it goes from 1.23 to 1.5, and that's because there's a $300,000 for the rec project that's coming out. So that explains the difference. So when you take a look at it in total, we have budget contributions of $1 million for just the non-water wastewater. Wastewater is 407. And then the transfer between the fiscal policy reserve and the community plan reserve comes to a total of 1.674. For our outflows, we have the rec complex reserve draw, that's 300,000, health and safety project, 60,000, replacement projects, 270, commitment to donations for healthcare, and that includes Brockholm District Foundation, Hospital Foundation, Mapleview Landings, as well as Sugar Park Manor. Improvement projects, 44,000, projects that align with plan 325, and then the water wastewater project that also aligns with strategic plan for 450. So net inflow of 143,000 between what's coming in and what's going out. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Armstrong? Councillor McConnell?
Thank you, Mayor Shankar. There's one thing that I didn't see on here. I looked for it, and it may very well be something that's listed with another name that I'm just not cluing in on. But I know a few months ago, we repurchased a property that we had sold many years ago. The idea is when we sell property, we have part of the sales structure is that if it is not developed or something towards development in 3 years, that we can repurchase it. In most cases, we haven't been doing that. And in this particular case, in attempting to do that, we found that we couldn't do that. So what I'm wondering here is we have several sales that we've done in the last few years. Where is the money from those sales? Is it somewhere here that I can't see, or is it in a different fund that isn't here? So that if we have sold, well, I don't know, let's say we sold something for $500,000 2 years ago, is that $500,000 sitting somewhere that we can access if nothing happens in a year's time to that property? And that's just an example that doesn't fit anything we have currently in the works for anybody that's listening. It was merely for an example.
So normally would sit in fiscal policy if we didn't designate it for some other purpose or use.
And if I may, what do we have in the fiscal policy right now?
At the end of 23, we were estimating about 420,000.
I see. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Through you, Mayor Shankar, I was just rethinking about beautifying the property in front of the Coast Guard. And did we determine if we did that, then who would be in charge of replanting and weeding? And would that be the town or would it be the Coast Guard?
It would most likely be the town. We're still working with the Coast Guard on what it exactly looks like. But I think they're fairly clear that if you want it to look like it does today, then that's what the Coast Guard level of funds and will be. If you want to beautify it and move it forward, then we're going to have to step in and do some work on that.
Okay, so just for the record, I guess I'm having a bit of a problem with that whole arrangement, but if it's already been in there, anyway, just to say.
Anyone else? All right. I'm gonna call the, oh.
If I may.
Mhm.
Mary has a good point with the Coast Guard. That's the better point of two blocks that was planted when that facility was new, which looked great for a number of years, which looked good when they actually had people there dedicated to look after it. But with the downsizing, that personnel disappeared and it's just been allowed to run rampant for years. And I walk by there every day with a dog and I'm disgusted, and people drop their poo bags and their Coke cans and whatever in there, and it looks awful. And we have a lot of people that do walk on the south side of the street because the doctor's offices are on the south side of the street, the parks are on the south side of the street. And given the resources of the federal government, I'm not happy that we have included something in this as far as a beautification plan to that part. And I've mentioned this before, but in retrospect, it occurs to me that before we took over the maintenance of the the pathway east of the marina, I used to walk my dog down there, and that was a dirt road that really wasn't cut, and there was no pathway, there was no lights, there was no benches. That's not Coast Guard, or that's not Coast Guard, that's not the fort, that's us that's been doing it. So we have set a precedent as far as beautifying and maintaining federal property for the benefit of the town. So in retrospect, though I did speak against that originally, I've come to the conclusion that it would be in the best interest of the town if we cannot get the federal government to do it. Given the fact that we have a conservative member and a liberal government, there's pretty much no chance of that. However, if in 26 the government changes, then I think we should press for something there. But in the meantime, I will be in favor of spending the money there.
I just have one, can I add on to that? If we clean up someone's property, we can add it to their taxes. Is there any option that we can sort of send them a bill and say, we've done your work and now we'd like the money? I already knew the
So a couple of
answer.
reasons for that. One,
I know,
the federal and provincial governments pay what they call in lieu of.
yeah.
So it's slightly different legislation, not the same ability to tack things onto that. Second is that while it doesn't look great, there's nothing from a health and safety or
Right.
property standards committee or property standards that would say, other than the bulldozer litter, absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of where we're stuck, and that they don't look favorably upon a junior level of government.
No, I already knew the answer, but I just wanted to ask.
What we're hoping for though is they're gonna do like some work in kind for us as well. So there'll be some give and take. The whole world runs on give and
Parking lot trade,
Right?
parking lot trade.
Well,
Yeah, okay, if I can make a suggestion, if we're actually gonna go ahead with this, and I suspect we will. I walk all that every morning, as I said, and quite often twice a day, and Mary, I think you do as well. There is one garbage can right beside the liquor store. And quite often the people come up from the park, as I do, and they do not hold the garbage until it gets to the liquor store. It would be nice if we had, there's some insets there. I think there's at least one bench. It'd be nice if we put a couple of more garbage cans between St. Lawrence Street and the liquor store. I think that would be, well, people that don't hold the garbage, don't hold the garbage anyway, but if you can see one, you know, within a reasonable period of space, it's an incentive anyway.
Idea.
Thank you. All right, seeing no further questions, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? All carried, thank you. Okay. Item 12.3 is a PowerPoint presentation regarding the housing enabling water system funding from our CEO Treasurer Armstrong. So we do have three recommendations here. What I think we'll do, because they're quite long and extensive, I'm going to get Mr. Armstrong to go through the PowerPoint presentation, and then we'll tackle each recommendation as it comes up. All right, floor is yours.
Very much, Mr. Mayor. So we're just going to walk through the presentation that was included in the package itself. We're just going to refer to. Technology is great when it works.
So I'm going to move the TV to the front. Gory and I can hold it.
Well, if everyone can look forward to that, hopefully I wrote it large enough that we're okay here.
My birthday, my wife already had flyers. One day here.
Oh, there we go. Good
So
job.
this evening, we're going to be talking about the Housing Enabled Water Systems Fund. I talked a little bit about this, I believe, either late last year or early this year. It is a fund that's being offered by the provincial government to help support municipalities to repair, expand, or rehabilitate both water, wastewater, storm infrastructure. Originally, it was only going to be 200 million for the municipalities that didn't get an allocation in terms of housing. They've since added 625 million to that number to come to a total of 825. And really the aim of this fund is to unlock housing potential and housing opportunities in municipalities. So municipalities that have their own water, waste, or wastewater or storm water infrastructure are eligible to apply. Obviously, the town of Prescott does have that. Joint projects are being encouraged where we have multiple applicants. So we've had the discussion with Augusta. I believe they're going to be passing or discussing it tonight at a council meeting, as well as Edwardsburg Cardinal. And both, I believe, have given their initial indications that they'd be willing to sign on to this as a part of an application. And each municipality is only allowed to submit one application. So if you are on a joint application, that precludes you from doing your own. So that being said, the maximum amount that you can ask for is 35 million project size. And when you have more than one applicant, then it goes up by $35 million per applicant. So eligible projects include, as I mentioned, rehabilitation, repair, reconstruction, or expansion of water and wastewater facilities. And really what they're aiming for is enabling growth and housing development, increasing access to clean drinking water, and increasing the treatment and or management of water and wastewater, water and stormwater. So open projects, I highlighted a couple that we're going to talk about in a few minutes, but pumping station, linear assets, and that's basically the pipes in the ground, and treatment plants for our wastewater are eligible. From a drinking water perspective, local pipes in the distribution system is eligible. It also has stormwater management assets, but that's not something that we're considering as part of an application at this point. So eligible projects also have to have a capital component to it, so it can't be just planning, and it actually has to be a construction component. Has to enable housing development, has to have a clear start date and end date. The start date is no later than September 30th, 2024, and it must be done by March 31st, 2027. And we should be in the process of working on design or completing it and in the planning stage. And we have to meet all relative regulatory requirements. All costs associated with preparing the application are not eligible for reimbursement. So projects that are, how the projects will be selected will be based on the technical merit, the project readiness, the financial capacity and need, and the critical public health and safety impact. Priority will be given to those that are in their advanced planning stages, for example, stage 4 environmental assessment. And then projects will be assessed based on program requirements, applicant eligibility, application completeness, assessment criteria, and then overall demand for the funds. We are expecting that this will be heavily subscribed to in terms of applications, so we want to make sure that we're putting the absolute best application forward. Funding amounts are 73% up to 35 million for eligible projects, and with the municipality covering the other 27%. Joint applications, as I mentioned, that is an escalator based on the number of and then municipalities can stack federal municipal funds for their 25%, or sorry, 27%. And so if you are allowed to use your OSIF funding to support your contribution towards it. So project conditions, project has to start by September 30th. That means that as long as we're in the planning phase, we don't have to start construction by September 30th. Is that we have to be undertaking planning. And we feel that we can meet that. Has to be completed by March 31st. We believe we can meet that as well. Housing development project should enable housing to increase the housing units, which I'll get to in a minute, and financial sustainability. So do we have a plan in place where once we expand our wastewater treatment plant, can we afford to run it? And the answer is yes, because expanding the capacity of the plant and the operation of the plant is not variable based on the amount of wastewater that you treat. There is really a very large fixed cost component. The electricity to run the overall system, the chemicals that are involved, the fact that we already have UV, running and that sort of thing. There's not a lot of consumable or variable side to the overall process, and the vast majority is fixed, whether you're doing 1,000 cubic meters or you're doing 3,000 cubic meters per day. There's not a lot of cost differentiation between the two. So increasing the capacity of the plant will not automatically increase the cost to operate the plant.
Excuse me, can we ask questions as we go along? Your third bullet point there, a housing development project should enable housing such as an increase in housing units created. I'm presuming that if we're looking at infrastructure for 40 houses or 400 houses, it's the infrastructure that has to be completed by March 31st and not the quantity of houses?
That's correct.
Thank you.
So we also have to make sure we are duty to consult as well as environmental assessment. I'll get back to that in a couple of minutes. Energy standards, we're not necessarily considering building buildings here. We're doing expansion of the capacity, and therefore energy standards and accessibility aren't necessarily top of mind, but certainly anything that's required will be met. So again, we have to also be part of our asset management plan. In our asset management plan that we passed in 2022, there was already an indication that we were going to be undertaking environmental assessment for the expansion of the wastewater treatment plant, because we're already running at 70 to 80%, and that tends to be a trigger to say that you need to take a look at environmental assessment and taking a look at that overall capacity increase. So again, key dates, April 19th is this Friday is when the application has to be submitted, and they have to start no later than September 30th, but those can be pre-construction costs such as design, engineering, project management, and the like. So if you remember back a little while ago, the joint study was done between Augusta and Prescott, and it really took a look at all of the lands in and around Prescott and running down to Maitland along County Road 2 in Augusta, and identifying the potential for residential, commercial, and industrial development. So obviously, part of the conclusions of that is that it made sense to extend municipal services into Augusta and through a western extension of those services. And really the part that you're seeing highlighted in blue is the area between Sophia and Mervyn Lane. So when we take a look at our water treatment plant, its design capacity is 8,200 cubic meters per day. The maximum daily flow from 2018 through 2020 was 5,080 cubic meters with available capacity of 3,100 cubic meters per day. So part of that study did identify infill and intensification opportunities within Prescott. There's approximately 300 residential lots that could be serviced and move forward with. And then there's approximately 20 hectares of industrial commercial development. So we've taken that and identified what would that leave in terms of water capacity to sell to others, so beyond our borders. And that means that 1,899 cubic meters per day, or the equivalent of 917 households. So long story short is that we have quite a bit of water treatment capacity still in our system to be able to meet our demands for growth now and into the future, as well as being able to sell beyond our border. From wastewater treatment capacity, it's a little bit different. So the design capacity was 4,700 cubic meters per day. Average daily flow was 3,465 cubic meters per day between 2018 and 2020. So that leaves an available capacity of about 1,263 cubic meters per day. Intensification and infill within Prescott, again, 300 lots as well as 20 hectares of industrial commercial development would then bring us down to only 193 cubic meters per day, or the equivalent of 126 households. So you can start to see where our Achilles heel is when it comes to being able to support development outside of the town of Prescott. So when the wastewater treatment plant was originally built, there was the concept of adding what they call a fourth bed or a fourth tank, and they're called sequence batch reactors. So when the water or wastewater is coming into the plant, it goes through a number of things. It goes to what we call the SBRs, which are sequence batch reactors. It goes through a bit of a mixing process there. It then eventually starts to be dewatered, and some of the bacterial side then moves to another tank, for lack of a better word. And that's where it starts to settle and that sort of thing. So to increase the size of our wastewater treatment plant capacity by 33%, all that we need to do is add that fourth SBR. And so really what you're looking at in the picture in front of you was actually part of the original construction design, and that was used for the plant when it was originally constructed. So there was provisions there for the fourth tank. They moved the road over to allow for that fourth tank. They moved the infrastructure around. They stubbed in the plumbing to allow for plumbing works to be for that fourth tank. So there was that thought in mind that eventually down the road, we might hit capacity, and this is how you would go about expanding it. So when we learned about this fund, and then we started taking a look at how we could support the joint needs study with Augusta and be able to support the housing that they envision between Merwin and Sophia, then we had our engineers kind of take a look at our wastewater system and say, in order to increase that capacity of the plant, is there anything upstream that we need to take a look at? So sewage pumping station number 5 is the one that's right on the border of Prescott and Ellersburg Cardinal, just before you hit New Wexford. Then that is a little pumping station on the north side of the road, and that is number 5. So currently, it would need some fairly extensive upgrades. When we go into overflow, it tends to be at that pumping station, and there's 2 things that would really improve by doing an expansion of this particular one, is that we would put pumps that would allow a lot more flow through, as well as there's a force main that runs from that pumping station about 1.4 kilometers into Edwardsburg Cardinal. And what a force main means is, instead of being gravity feed, we're actually pushing the wastewater flow up a hill. And so there's a bunch of dips and dives, but ultimately from that point to where that 1.4 meters stops is generally uphill. From there, it starts to go gravity feed to the rest of the plant. So there's about another kilometer that runs to the plant, and it's gravity feed. So we would need to upgrade and expand the size of that force main from 450 millimeters to 600 millimeters. Then when it hits the gravity feed, it's already 750 millimeters. So it flows downhill just as poop should. So so at the plant itself is pumping station number 6. And so it accepts everything and then pumps it into the plant. It will also need some substantial upgrading, but the size of the pipes itself looks sufficient at this point. Then what we have is what we call the headworks. And the headworks is all kind of the plumbing that comes into the plant, through the plant, and allows it to move around the plant. And so in particular, there's a screening area, and currently we have 1 mechanical screen and 1 manual bar screen that's good for 16,000 cubic meters per day. With an upgrade to the plant increasing by a third, we would have to have 2 mechanical screens with a rate of 25,000 cubic meters per day. This may become a challenge depending on space, but something certainly that as we work through the design, we'll have a better understanding of. There's also grit removal. So there's 2 vortex grit removals that are rated at 8,000 cubic meters per day. And going forward, we'll need to increase that to 12,608 cubic meters per day each. The splitter box was already designed for the 4th bed, so there's no change there. And then the blower, we would have to go from 3 blowers, because there's 1 blower per tank, to add 4. For the reactors itself, that's where I was talking about that 4th tank, and there would be a common wall construction between the 3rd and the 4th tank. Pumps would have to be upgraded to allow for that. The equalization tank would have to be expanded to allow for the flow from 4. The UV disinfectant would have to be expanded to 25,000 cubic meters per day. And the aerobic digester, that's what I was looking for earlier, already meets the requirements from MECP. Sludge storage, we already have quite a difficulty with in terms of the amount of sludge that we create and our ability to deal with it. And so we would be moving from basically 2,090 cubic meters plus the drying beds to be able to handle 7,200 cubic meters. With that, we would also be looking to put in a centrifuge and things like that to actually be able to decrease the amount of water that's in the sludge, and therefore you're hauling less away. If you're hauling less water away, then it becomes a lot cheaper per cubic meter because you're able to fit more in there. And the outfall, which is basically the pipe that goes back out to the St. Lawrence, will continue to meet the requirements. So the project proposal, as we have it at this moment, is that we expand the wastewater treatment plant to accommodate housing in the Prescott Township, as well as being able to support the housing that we have and the infill and whatnot in the town of Prescott, to go from 4,700 cubic meters per day to 6,300. We would also upgrade pumping stations number 5 and 6 and upsize the sanitary force main from pump station number 5 up to the point where it starts to feed to the gravity. We would also install water and sewer mains in Augusta along County Road 2 for 5.8 kilometers. There's an environmental assessment is required to expand the size of the plant. If it was to start now, it takes approximately 6 months to complete, and the cost is about 150,000, but they are valid for 10 years. So even if we're not successful in this particular application, it is good for 10 years. And we also had it on the asset management plan to undertake it in 2025. So this is just moving it up a year to coincide with this particular application.
Excuse me, can I ask a question? The agreement that we have with Edwardsburg Township and that Augusta essentially signed into, if memory serves me correctly, because I was there when we did that, was that whatever township was responsible for the cause of the increase of either the water plant, no, it was the sewage treatment plant, the water plant was separate, was responsible for the cost of that construction. Now, we have, as you mentioned, a possibility of several hundred houses in Prescott, but that pipe that you're running out into Augusta Township and the pipe that we're running from pump station number 5 east, which is largely to handle that extra flow, how is Augusta Township going to be assessed as far as our cost, the 37, was it, percent?
27. Yep.
27?
Yep.
How are they going to be assessed? Because this is largely on them.
Mhm. So what we would, what we're looking at is any infrastructure that's installed in Augusta would be Augusta's responsibility for the 27%. Anything that is expended from the water wastewater treatment plant, the pumping stations, that force main that we talked about, would all be recouped through sale of capacity. So the more that they purchase in terms of capacity, in the very similar way that we did with Edwardsburg Cardinal, then we would be reimbursed, and that would go towards our 27%.
Thank you.
So also the design work that's not dependent on the environmental assessment, if we were to get moving on that now, would also be beneficial for our application. And then if we were successful in this entire application and we completed our environmental assessment, basically by September, got the design work done and underway, we would be able to tender next June, shovel in the ground in August, and that would allow us to finish in time for March 31st of 2027. So there's several parts to this. Pumping station upgrades don't necessarily have to wait on changes to the wastewater treatment plant. The installation of a pipe into Augusta can be separate from the rest of the project. So there's really a total of three basic projects with this that can all have differing time frames. And that would allow us to move forward with some while we're waiting on the design for the others. And I think that would certainly help, not kind of combining into all of one, where we're trying to coordinate too many things at once. So what I'm trying to say, long story short, is that pumping stations and the pipes in the ground can move before the other work, whereas the wastewater treatment plant itself will start, if we're approved, in 2025, and it will take the longest to finish. So we would be likely working all through all of 26 to finish in 27. So project benefits. So from a wastewater treatment plant perspective, we would be able to support 1,550 homes. That's the 300 infill for Prescott, and the 126 that's currently uncommitted, and then 1,124, which the expansion would be able to support. So that meets objective number 1 when we were talking about the objectives in the beginning. The construction of sanitary and water main running into Augusta along County Road 2 will increase access to clean water, drinking water. So that's objective number 2. And then the upsizing of the wastewater treatment plant, sanitary pumping station, the force main that runs east of Prescott into Edwardsburg Cardinal will increase the capacity, which is objective number 3, as well as it will reduce the chances of the system going into bypass due to heavy rains. So we took a look at the last several years, and since 2019, in 2019 itself, there were 6 bypasses, all due to heavy rain. You'll remember in 2019 that was a very high year of rain as well as level in the river, and that was due to rain. In 2020, we had one bypass. In 2023, we had two bypasses. All of those bypasses happened as a result of pump station number 5 not being able to keep up. And so we believe with this improvement that it would then push everything down the road as it should, and the system wouldn't go into bypass. So from a costing perspective, these are fairly high numbers. We haven't had the ability or time to go through a detailed design, but our EVB did go through all of our subsystems and the wastewater treatment plant, as well as those upstream impacts. And a lot of this was also taken a look at and evaluated as part of the joint needs study. So from a professional fees perspective, we're just going to look at the water and sewer into Augusta, because that will not be part of our responsibility in our portion. So about 1.6 million in professional fees, construction in the $15 million range, contingency of 25%. So we're at $4 million for a total project cost of $20.5 million. If we're successful in our application, that would be 15 million coming from the grant, and then 5.5 million would be Augusta's portion. From a wastewater treatment plant perspective, as well as the pumping stations, so about $1.8 million in terms of professional fees, 12 million in terms of construction, 3.5 million in contingency, for a total project of about 17.4 million. Breaking that down, if we're successful in the application, it would be 12.7 from the grant, and then 4.7 for the municipal portion. So when we take a look at that, if we're selling capacity, to give you an indication, I think it was basically each new house provides about $23,000 in additional capacity sale. So of that, about $10,000 is in relation to water, and $13,000 is in relation to wastewater. So it doesn't take long to recoup your money back when we develop those numbers. That we've been working on over the last couple of years in terms of an agreement with Augusta that we're working towards coming to kind of an understanding on. It's very similar to what we signed in Edwardsburg Cardinal, but with kind of updated numbers to reflect the overall system cost. So with that, we're looking at a total project cost of 38 million, of which, if we're successful, 27.8 would come from the provincial government through the grant, and then 10 million would be the municipal portion, shared obviously with us, Augusta, and if Edwardsburg Cardinal provide or purchases any additional capacity, then that would be there as well. So kind of come to that point, and so more than happy to answer any questions before we get into the recommendation.
All right. Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Mayor Schenker. As you well know, we are not light borrowers in the last few years. Our most recent borrow is for the arena. And of course, we have the water tower, which is going to come on reasonably soon. We've been very fortunate with the arena in upper level buy-ins and the tremendous fundraising that went on. The same deal with the water tower. And this is almost too good to pass up with the amount of money that we could get here to expand the sewage treatment plant. But in meetings at the sewage treatment plant, there is no rush to expand it right now because we have lots of capacity going forward. And if this didn't come up, I suspect we wouldn't be discussing expanding it at all, which is a long way around, which I usually take. Where are we going to get the money for our portion? And you mentioned the capacity thing from Edwardsburg. Well, fine, they don't have any extra capacity right now. And the assessment for housing in Augusta, but it could be 5 years before they build houses in Augusta. Somebody's going to have to foot the bill between them and that, or then and now, which is us. So where is the money coming from?
So of the 4.7, we already have 3 million in reserve. And that was largely built up through the sale of our capacity to Edwardsburg Cardinal, as well as we've been earning decent interest. And we also invested in the equity fund several years ago in 2019. So we've, all of that said is that we already have 3 million in the bank to be able to support the 4.7. And then we believe in relatively short order by 2027 that Augusta would be in a position to certainly start buying capacity, if not before. So they already have kind of a couple of projects that are coming to near approval. And so we believe, and we would be able to support them through this and with that sale of capacity.
The money that we have, that we accumulate in that fund, though, is also going towards the repairs and replacement of our own sewers in town here and separation projects. Are you anticipating not doing any more until Augusta comes on board, or what?
No, so we have 4 funds in total. And one for the water treatment plant, one for water infrastructure, one for the wastewater treatment plant, and one for wastewater infrastructure. So the 3 million that I'm referring to is for the wastewater treatment plant only, and not for any of the infrastructure work that we do on a bi-yearly basis. So we would still be able to continue our work with that and be able to support that. Really, we have one fund that's dedicated to the wastewater treatment plant itself, and that's the one that I'm referring to.
Okay, one last, if I may.
Okay.
It's interesting that this pops in because there's 2 other things on our agenda tonight that kind of tie into this as well. And as luck would have it, both of them are coming from me. But at the time, I didn't know this was coming. But I was going to say without broadening the conversation, but it will. We have the area north of the tracks and south of Churchill Road, which is slated for residential in town, not in Augusta. And I suspect that that is either not going to wind up being developed for years because of infrastructure, lack of money. Would it not be more prudent for us to be spending money, if we can, with this developer, putting infrastructure in there to actually see houses built in Prescott where we're going to get the assessment, we're going to get the tax revenue, and they're still going to wind up paying for sewer and water?
So just want to make sure. So could you just repeat where you're referring to again?
West of Boundary, south of Churchill, north of the railroad tracks, east of the overpass. In other words, that vast area that we sold a couple of years ago, and it can support, given the fact that there are apartment buildings in the area, it's reasonable to expect that more apartment buildings it would be reasonable to expect that concentrated housing rather than independent or separate homes would likely be in there. So there's a possibility of several hundred homes in that section. Would it not be more reasonable, if we're going to wind up spending money, to see that it's spent so that housing is built in Prescott rather than adjacent to us where we're not going to get the tax revenue? These are going to be Prescott residences, not people who call themselves Prescott residences that live outside of town, not to mention any names you understand.
So if we're going to look at putting street and infrastructure and things like that in, I think that is probably more detailed and more
Time-consuming
than what they're kind of looking at. They're, or at least from the perspective that we're trying to create a branch that goes into Augusta and create the capacity necessary to do the wastewater treatment plant. But if, I don't necessarily, I'm not sure that we want to get into building the street and the infrastructure and everything like that, for a private developer to then build houses around. And especially if we're not, if we build it and then wait for them to come and it's not what they were looking for or needed, then we have some other issues that we'd have to deal with.
Well, certainly the planning involved, who figured this was coming down the road. I don't know if there's been any discussion with that developer or not. And we also have the other street that Woodland, is that the street you live on, Leanne?
Woodland, yeah.
Yeah, so that goes north or doesn't go north to intersect to Fishel, and it doesn't because nobody wants to pay for the services. And it seems to me that this might fit into that as well.
We hadn't considered those two particular streets or developments, but we're happy to.
Well, we're time constrained now, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think we're asking for $38 million, so, and it's gonna increase our capacity. I did have a question for you, Matthew. When we talk about the water treatment plant, is that with the new water tower in mind,
Correct.
the numbers?
So the water treatment plant has always sat at about 8,000 cubic meters per day. We were severely lacking in water storage because our water tower was undersized. So our new water tower is adequately sized that you could run up to the 8,000 capacity on the water treatment plant, and the way the tower would be able to support that.
Okay. And one more thing that I noticed on the media was they were giving priority to municipalities that had a transit system as well. So I think with, the along Highway 2 and everything, the river route would qualify for that too, right?
Correct.
Thank you. Any other questions, Councillor Young?
Thank you, Mayor Shankar. Matthew, despite that, the environmental assessment is part of the asset management plan, could we expect Augusta to contribute to the environmental assessment?
We haven't had that conversation, but I'm sure that conversation can be had as we move forward and figure out the exact allocation of how we want to do this.
Councillor Campbell?
Through you. I understand with grants, it is important to have joint applications. It gives you just a bit of a step up. But if we applied alone as Prescott, because we're pretty much asking just for the 38 million. But if we go in with Augusta, we could be asking for twice that, right?
No, that would be the whole amount combined. So our application, our joint application would be for 38 million that would cover branch into Augusta, which they'd be responsible for the municipal portion for, as well as the upgrade to the wastewater treatment plant, the pumping stations, and the force main.
But if I read this correctly, if you go in with another municipality, you can twice 35,000, 35 million, sorry.
Yeah, so yeah, definitely with 3 municipalities, you could go up to 105. I think if you're going to submit a $105 million project, our chances decrease substantially when you only have 825 million.
Yeah, no, we don't need that. I'm saying we're pretty close to being able, for what we need, just to do it on our own. That's just a point.
There's still the 27%.
Yes.
And at the same time, we don't have enough land left to support additional housing that would require the expansion of the wastewater treatment plant.
Okay. And how close is Augusta? I mean, this is due on Friday, so how close are they to be voting on this?
They're fully on board from my understanding, and they're willing to be joint applicants on this. And we've been working with them on the costing and the design and making sure that we're meeting all of their requirements.
So their vote though is potentially tonight?
Yes.
Then,
Well, to their vote, they've been clear, and I'm pretty sure they already have motions in place that the developments they're working on and working towards approval on are contingent upon Prescott Water and Sewer. And so they're already they're just passing a formal motion in support of this particular application for being specific.
Okay.
Councillor Kirkby?
If I may, through you, Mayor Shankar, obviously this was talked at the wastewater treatment meeting. And the one thing a couple of things I'd like to bring forward was one, the capacity for the water treatment plant can always be expanded. There's a cost, but it's not as high as when I was thinking like, oh, we're limited if we give it all to Augusta, what happens if we get 700 homes? Do you know what I mean? And the engineer from EBB was here and he explained that, you know, it doesn't mean you have to have a bigger water tower or stuff like that. There's other ways to increase the flow of the water to increase more homes, the same as the wastewater treatment. So I think we have a really good opportunity here to have something developed on the west side of Prescott versus something that we may not like. Meaning, you know, it could be come in and be industrial. We don't own that land, Augusta does. I think they've come here looking for support. Obviously, if it's got to this point, there's been some discussions at the staff level. I think this would be the best scenario for Prescott is to welcome residential and light commercial to that land versus something else that would be out of our control. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kirkby.
Through you, Mayor.
Councillor Watt?
As Councillor Kirkby said, this was discussed in great length at the meeting. And as Councillor McConnell pointed out, this isn't our first kick at the can with Augusta because there is already a development that you're aware of that has the water and sewer in Augusta. And to my understanding, that project went very well and it was a good working combination. So I think we have a great opportunity as well.
Thank you, Councillor. All right. So at this point, can I go through each recommendation? We'll do one recommendation at a time.
How did you want to do that?
Yes. Yep.
We broke up each.
All right, so there are three recommendations. So the first recommendation reads that council directs staff to submit a joint application to the Housing Enabling Water Systems Funds for the one, expansion of the wastewater treatment plant and upgrades and upsizing of the pumping stations and forced main, the wastewater treatment plant, and extension of water and sewer mains into Augusta Township. Can I have a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Kirkby, seconded by Councillor Burton. All in favor?
Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
You say there was three?
We'll do one at a time.
Oh,
That way we can,
so this is
this is the first.
not one or the other?
This is just the first of the three. It's just easier to do it on.
But what
Which part is this?
no, what I'm saying is this isn't a choice, so this one,
No.
this one, or this one.
The three different recommendations.
Okay, that's fine.
Sorry. Is it important to put that it's a joint application with Augusta in the?
It's a joint application to them, but it will also be with Augusta and
Edgersburg, okay.
correct? Yep. Okay. All in favor? Gary, thank you. All right, the second recommendation reads that council directs staff to proceed with an environmental assessment for the expansion of the wastewater treatment plant. Something we were going to do anyway. So I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Lockett, seconded by Councillor McConnell. Any questions? All in favor? Carried, thank you. And the third recommendation is that council directs staff to proceed with design work related to the project that is not reliant on an environmental assessment being completed once the project receives approval. Can I have a mover and seconder for discussion? Councillor Burton, Councillor Young, do you just want to elaborate on that for us, please?
So we don't want to put a lot of money and time into design work if we're not successful in the approval. So The environmental assessment's good for 10 years. The design work wouldn't necessarily. So if they give us a green light, the day they give us the green light, this will then allow us to start moving forward with the design work. And in particular, for the pumping stations, for the linear infrastructure piped in the ground, that doesn't require the EA, so we can get moving on those piece of design work right away. And then once the EA is done, then we would work on the design work for the wastewater treatment. So it allows us to start moving the ball forward on those kind of two smaller projects without having to wait for the EA to be completed.
Very good.
There is a benefit which we haven't mentioned, which may have been mentioned at the wastewater management meeting, and that is the substandard, I'd have to say, cement that we have in the 3 tanks at our sewage treatment plant now. If we put a 4th tank in that we really don't need now, that would allow us to shut 1 tank down at a time and rehabilitate those without any loss of capacity at all. And of course, now would be the time to do it when we get the 4th one in.
There was some discussion on that at the meeting.
Completely agree with that concept. And so as soon as the 4th tank's up and running in place, that becomes usable. Then we would take a look at how we rehabilitate the other 3. The rehabilitation can occur anytime in the next 20 years. So it's not a have to today, but by having that additional capacity, and it's going to take several years to really meet that full capacity, that it does give us that 5 to 10 year buffer to be able to rehabilitate that one and then be able to move forward. And even on a yearly basis, we drain one of the tanks, inspect it all. It hasn't progressed. Thankfully, it's stabilized. It's not leaking any worse, that sort of thing. And so we are confident that this will allow us that buffer for when we do decide to rehabilitate to what that looks like.
Okay. Can we get that guy that's got that little plastic rubber that throws it on there and seals it?
Sure. Yeah, it will just get some Plex seal.
Plex seal, that's it.
We'll just
Call him in.
inside of it. We're good. We're good.
We all saved. All right. I'm going to call the question then. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. All right. 13 is resolutions. Item 13.1 is a resolution regarding a planning advisory committee appointment. The recommendation reads that that council appoint the following member to the planning advisory committee for the remainder of the term of council. Congratulations to Susan Majerus. Can I have a mover and a seconder for Councillor Walker, Councillor Kirkby? All in favor? Carried, thank you. All right. 14 is bylaws. There's one item under bylaws this evening. It's 14.1, the sidewalk patio bylaw. Recommendation is that bylaw 14-2024 being a bylaw to regulate and establish associated fees for the use of sidewalks and boulevards for seasonal sidewalk patios within the town of Prescott core zone be read and passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, and sealed by the seal of the corporation. Mover and seconder, Councillor Burton, Councillor Kirkby. All in favor? All in favor, opposed? Carried, thank you. All right, 15 is new business. So 15.1 is a motion to request an eligibility review of the Physician Northern and Rural Recruitment and Retention Initiative. Councillor Kirkby, this one's yours.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Shankar. Previously, I read this resolution. It's coming back for the vote. So where the objective of the Northern and Rural Recruitment and Retention Initiative is to attract physicians and establish full-time practice in eligible underserviced communities. And whereas the and our offers a taxable financial recruitment incentives to each eligible physician who establishes a full-time practice in an eligible community of the province by providing grants that range between 84,000 and 124,000 paid over a 4-year period. I believe I read this whole thing before. Whereas the physicians are entitled to receive only one grant per career, and whereas the community eligibility for the NRRI is based on Rurality Index for Ontario score, which is assigned to Statistics Canada Census subdivisions, which is a measure of rurality that ensures funding is specially targeted to the northern and very rural communities. Whereas the RO 2008 basic score is derived from 3 factors, being population count and density, travel time to a basic referral center, and travel time to an advanced referral central. And whereas municipalities of the town of Prescott, Township of Augusta, Township of Edwardsburg, Cardinal are not eligible for the Northern and Rural Recruitment Retention Initiative, despite a combined population of 18,969 and a density of 30 residents per square kilometer. Whereas the newly adopted 2024-2027 strategic plan for the town of Prescott prioritizes the advocacy for recruitment of additional medical, mental addictions and health practitioners. Now therefore it be resolved that the council of the town of Prescott requests the province to revisit the eligibility criteria for physician, northern and rural recruitment and retention initiative to attract physicians to establish a full-time practice in eligible underserviced communities to better reflect the need for support for physicians in rural municipalities, that a copy of this resolution be sent to the Honorable Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, Honorable Sylvia Jones, Deputy Premier and Minister of Health, Steve Clark, Member of Provincial Parliament for Leeds and Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, Prescott Family Health Team, and all municipalities in Leeds and Grenville. You're here. That's fair. I had to read that twice.
Should record it the first time, then it hit play.
I really missed the R's.
Yeah. Triple
Triple R is cheating, I think. He's gonna move that, and you need a seconder.
I'll second that.
Thank you. We've discussed this enough. Would you like to read it again?
No, I feel hot right now.
All in favor? Carrie, thank you. All right, 15.2 is Township of Augusta Notice of Decision Official Plan Amendment. Councilor McConnell, this one's yours.
Thank you, Mayor Shankar. This was in our, I believe, information package a while ago, and given the extent of the thing, I wasn't sure whether everybody had the opportunity or bothered to read through it, but it's very extensive. And given the fact that it abuts us on a very long border and can impact our residential traffic, it can impact our drainage, green space. I thought we should have an opportunity to see if anybody had any. I'm certainly not going to go to the point of reading it like Justin here had. We could be here all night. But there are a few things that concern me about that. One of them is the assumption that the streets from Prescott are just going to be continued into Augusta Township, and their preference for the streets to be laid out in a grid pattern like ours are in the old part of town, which I shouldn't say we all agree, but as far as plowing and that type of thing and wayfinding, it's a lot easier than circles and stuff. But we have dead end streets. We have Henry Street, which Mary, her back door is on, and Ruth lives off the end of it. But that was not connected to our street system purposely. But we do have Dibble Street, we have James Street, we have Jessup Street, and we have Hyde Street, which actually dead ends at Sophia. And we have citizens that live on those dead end streets, have lived on those dead end streets for decades. People very often buy a house on a dead end street because it doesn't have through traffic. Their children can play on the street with much less danger. And I will not vote in anything that approves the connection of those streets into Augusta Township. I do not think that is beneficial for the town. We're not going to be getting taxes on those houses, and yet if we connect our streets, we're going to have traffic on those streets, which increases the wear and tear on those streets, increases the danger, the noise, the possibility of collisions at intersections on Sophia. And I really don't think it's a good idea, and I don't think it's good planning. In most subdivisions, and this would be a subdivision, there is a provision for collector streets and streets that feed into the collector streets. And it seems to me that for that area, a collector street running off of King Street, running north towards the railroad tracks, and then connecting with, I believe, Hyde Street, which actually dead ends at Sophia, does not cross Sophia, would be the sensible thing. And then to have the other streets feed into that one. So if you have somebody that's going to Brockville, they're not going to be sliding down Sophia Street. If you have somebody going to our downtown or our parks or the pool, they're not going to be going through the main body of Prescott. They're going to go down to King Street and then go east or west. If they're going to our arena, if they're going to our grocery store, Canadian Tire, whatever, then they would be coming out at the corner of Sophia and Hyde, and then going north. So the main body of the west end of town would be spared the extra traffic from all of these new residents up there. So that concerns me greatly. The other thing we have is, it's been variously known. I think Bradley's Creek is the last name that's been affixed to it. But at one time, the drainage for that ran right through to, underneath Tim Hortons. That entire area where Tim Hortons was a marsh. When I went to high school out there, there was cattails. It dropped probably about 5 feet below the level of Edward Street. That's all been filled in, but we do have drainage from there north, out around close to the Canadian Tire, thence westwardly into Augusta. And from what I read in here, they're encouraging recreational pathway use of that type of drainage area. And it's not going to dead end at Prescott. We're going to have to accommodate that coming south to hook in with any residential biking, walking pathways that we have. So I think there is a reasonable grounds here for us to have our staff take a very close look at this, maybe a closer look at it than they have so far. And I think we need a discussion to see if anybody else's concerns equal mine or whether there are any concerns in addition to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So do you have a motion or anything?
I don't have a motion. I brought that forward for discussion. I was hoping there would be. And if there is discussion, then perhaps a motion would come out of that.
Okay. Discussion? Ms. Campbell?
So I didn't read every word of this yet, but did the expanding the streets actually be named or assumed, or expanding the Prescott streets into Augusta? Is that part of this?
Yeah, it's in here, and
Okay.
the picture, you can see it kind of dotted.
Oh, yeah, okay. And were, through you again, were we part of, to Matthew, were we part of discussions about expanding streets into Augusta?
I believe this was all part of the joint land needs study. I think when you take a look at that particular document, that a lot of what you're seeing is in there. We have had input at various points and being able to say, you know, what makes sense in terms of being able to connect into recreational paths, that sort of thing. We're working on the Seymour Recreation Complex, which will have its own set of internal recreation. And then one of the projects that we foresee in the future is actually creating a multi-use path, the length of Church Road back to Edward, so that it does kind of create that great circle. So yeah, I think what you're seeing here is the result of you know, the work that went into the joint needs study, as well as you know, obviously planners and from their side, and as well as what we paid for through the joint needs study. Certainly identified all these potentials, as well as the linkages and how they would connect into Prescott.
So again, through you, so the deadline seems to have passed April 9th in order to.
Yeah, so Augusta, we talked about this in December, I think. It was either November, December when Augusta passed theirs. I didn't receive any other kind of feedback from council. Then once Augusta passed theirs, then the United Counties passed theirs. I think the point to remember is that this is not an approval of where those roads are going to go or anything like that. It's just potential in how they would see that. So as you can see, they've kind of created a northwest, east, north, south, east, west collectors. And then I think certainly up for discussion is, you know, how and where that would actually connect into Prescott itself.
Through you again, so we would be involved in those decisions.
Certainly,
Where the roads
any
go.
extension of our
Okay.
streets into another municipality would obviously be, you know, a large discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Byrne?
Thank you, Mayor Shankar. I see other benefits on this. I see people shopping in our stores. I see children registrations, registrations going up. I see our stores and our dining being utilized even more. I'm sure we could come up with some kind of an agreement with Augusta down the road to maintain our streets. And like you said earlier, Mayor Shankar, you said, you know, it's always a give and take relationship. So I'm sure we can come up with some kind of an agreement that will satisfy Augusta and Prescott. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Britton. Councillor Kirkby?
Through you, Mayor Shankar. The one thing I'll say is a lot of this field at one time was an apple orchard that's south of the train tracks in this section here. I believe even north of the train tracks for a bit, and then it turned into farmer's field. As long as I can remember, since the apple orchard kind of went down and stuff, that's been like one of the areas, even as a younger person, thinking that would be the ideal location for more housing if the town grew, right? I mean, Matthew said that this is just kind of a drawing and everything will be discussed at a further level. To me, it is beneficial to have some connections that run into town through existing streets, just for the simplification of bringing people into town, into the downtown businesses, up to the ACC, into the future Seymour recreational complex fields. You know, I think this has been a long time waiting, and this kind of diagram here personally gets me excited. Are we going to get all the tax money from it? No, but we're going to get the sale of water and wastewater, and potentially, maybe even we could slide in some RSL service there, which my understanding is can be done. It's just an application process. So, you know, we may not get the tax, but we have services that we could sell and potentially benefit from while reaping some of the rewards of having maybe 1,000 homes here or 900 homes or light commercial or something. That's all. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Kirkby. All right, so we'll take that. It's good discussion to have, and we'll take that and, keep that in mind for when the discussion comes in further. Okay. All right, 15.3 is Township of Amaranth, the operational budget funding. This is you.
Yes, this one's quite long. So shorten this up. We covered this before. So I'm just going to give you the background and then I'll give you my spin on it. So the background, the following information was included in the background or explaining the terms of a new deal between Ontario and Toronto as published by the province of Ontario. The government of Ontario and the city of Toronto have together reached a deal that will help them achieve long-term financial stability, sustainability for the city. And the deal includes the following: 1.2 billion in provincial operating funds over 3 years, up to 7.6 billion in capital relief for Toronto. And then there's additional supports, commitments by the city, joint call on the federal. So we'll skip down to up to 197 million over 3 years. This is in Ottawa for operating support. Up to 346 million over 10 years in provincial capital support, again for Ottawa. So when we get right down to this, the township, the resolution from Amaranth is calling for fairness in the distribution of funds. So I've put this together quickly for you here, and I'll break it down to you like this. So Toronto alone is going to receive $1,212,000,000 in operating shortfall, right? So in operating costs, there's 390 municipalities in Ontario that share 500 million. So just look at that there and ask yourself, does that seem fair? And everybody will say, well, it's a big population, but we're talking about 390 municipalities that are facing the same struggles as they are in Toronto with infrastructure and people moving in and stuff like that. And so then the next one, we go Toronto and Ottawa will receive $7,946,000,000 combined from the province, while 425 small, rural and northern communities across Ontario will get, 400 million. So again, it looks a little unequal. And I know we've talked about we're getting grants and all this. We went through a bunch of grants that we're going to apply for tonight, but the same goes for Toronto and Ottawa. So again, what I will refer to here is the resolution from Amaranth on operational budget funding is really what we're looking for, or what they're looking for is fairness, which I feel is something that we should support. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone have questions for Councilor Kirkby? Councilor McConnell?
I don't disagree with anything that Councillor Kirby said. What I would find interesting, I guess, I'm certainly not going to ask Matthew to do it on the fly here, but if you took the population of Toronto, if you took the population of Ottawa, divided into what you have.
I have the. So
What we get and the population of Prescott have that line up. And if you do.
yeah, so
I
if you took like the if you took the Toronto, right, population and compared it to ours, right, the Toronto per resident would be about $2,000. We sit around 407 per resident.
But that's,
I did the math that way. I did it a couple different ways. But anyways, yeah.
Is that your divide?
So,
1.6 million that we get from OSIF? Oh, I'm sorry, OMPF?
yeah, I did that and then I did so I did operating and then I did capital, right? So I'll be honest, I scribbled it in here and I thought, oh, that's too much information. But the one I did, there's a couple. So sorry, the one was 2,998 and that would be the bigger portion. So that would be the operating. Right, just let me look here to make sure I'm talking right. Yeah, and then, so they would get 2,998 per resident, and we would get 513.
Councillor Young?
Thank you, Mayor Schaefer. The thing I find really interesting is that the city of Toronto, what does it say? The city of Toronto has the lowest tax rates in the province.
yeah.
So the rest of us are burdened with having to increase our taxes, but the city of Toronto seems to be exempt from that. So to me, that really shows on, why are they not supposed to be increasing their taxes?
Right, so when you look at the average, right, and compare it to us, it's funny numbers. You really have to dive into what the average home here is, because they just kind of do a quick scan and put it towards a value of a house up there. And yeah, they're paying less, a good chunk of it.
I don't think they're paying, what's the right word? Like if we have a house, I think the average house around here, I think when Charlie Mignot had a presentation, was 500,000. I think Toronto's 1.2 million. Right, so they may have a lower tax rate, but it's based on 1.2 million as opposed to 500,000, right? And we all know that MPAC hasn't done an evaluation in 6 years, maybe? 8 years. So all of our evaluations are low right now, but the tax rate isn't gonna double because your house value has doubled. Do you know what I mean? Like, we gotta keep it within normal range. So I think it's really tough to play around with numbers and to compare, but 299 to, 3,000 to 500 is a difference. Okay, do you want to put a motion forward?
I think, yes,
Yes, okay, so you're gonna move it?
I will move it.
Do you have it?
Yep.
Thank you.
Mayor Shanker, I have a draft motion that reads that Council of the Corporation of the Town of Prescott supports the resolution from the Township of Amaranth regarding operational budget funding, and that a copy of this resolution be sent to the Honorable Doug Ford, Premier, the Honorable Paul Calandra, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Steve Clark, Member of Provincial Parliament for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes, and all municipalities in Leeds and Grenville.
Okay, we have a mover. We need a seconder. Councillor Burton, all in favor? Carried, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, last is the housing discussion. Councillor McConnell, you're gonna give us an update there?
Yeah, this went into, I was gonna say everybody's package, but everybody doesn't have a package, a written package like me. It's on your computer, I believe, as of this morning. I hope everybody has read it. I would be happy to read it if you would like me to. It's up to you.
Oh, that's okay.
Essentially, we have some strategies with our strategic plan, and those strategies are largely influenced by the provincial government's intensification. They want us to make more, take more advantage of the infrastructure that we have, and rather than building new. Now, I mentioned earlier that what we're discussing with the expansion of the sewage treatment plant kind of encompasses the two things, and this is one of them. But you can build infrastructure for new subdivisions, and you're looking at millions and millions of dollars. And the area that I referenced north of Churchill Road earlier, it's probably what you're into is millions of dollars before that was ever developed. Anybody that has driven down the third concession north of Brockville and seen the massive construction project there with all that rock over the past year, will realize that's what they're doing there. It occurred to me that I walk a lot, and when you walk around town and when you look at the different types of housing that we have, it's quite obvious that we have had a lot of infilling over the years. And these have sometimes come in waves because you can see houses that look very similar on streets and in areas, and they were likely built about the same time. An excellent example of that is the 4 on Edward Street across from the St. Lawrence Academy. If you take a look around the west end of Prescott, you'll find many of those same houses built in different places. And of course, the subdivisions have quite a number of them as well. My idea was, I wondered what we had in the way of what I would consider existing infill lots that could be severed without the town spending any money on infrastructure to build on. And so being retired and having some time, weather is not too bad. I went for a walk, and I walked on every street south of the tracks, every block, and I marked down any spot that I thought would take a house. And quite obviously, some people are not going to be interested in severing a piece off their property. But if they were approached with, if you really don't need that, if somebody said you could have $20,000, would you be interested in helping out the housing situation and so forth? So what I come up with was, I believe, 54 spots in the lower town of Prescott that you could sever if people were responding and wanted to do it, where you could build a house. Most of those, I would say, are for smaller, more affordable houses. Some of them are for full-size houses, but most of them, I would say, are for smaller homes. We have, and you don't realize until you do something like this, but we actually have a lot of smaller homes in Prescott, but they don't come up for sale very often. For example, a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom house is a small house. If you are a senior and you decide that you really don't need your 2-story house anymore, but what are you going to do? You don't want to move in an apartment. If a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom house was available, maybe on slab on grade, they've been doing that in Brockville, or with the basement, it would be more conducive for that type of person to divest themselves and move into the smaller one. It would be the same type of thing if you wanted to get into the housing market. Smaller house, smaller property, it would give you an in to do that. And I had an example of this, an excellent example. When I was out walking, I noticed Bill Countryman washing his car in his driveway. It was a nice day, and I don't know for years. I stopped, said hello. He said, "What are you doing?" So I explained it to him. And he said, well, you see right next door here beside his driveway, there was a small house. And he said, that used to be a vacant lot. It was owned by the house to the east. She severed it, built a small house, sold it to her daughter. And I said, well, that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's taking a piece of property that may not be necessary at this time and severing it. Now, I was at the committee that deals with that a couple of weeks ago. And there was a lot on Dibble Street West in the $500 block. The person wanted to sever it. And I went out of curiosity to see whether there would be any local objections. And the next door neighbor had a few questions, but there were no objections. And I think if you were to do this, to encourage this, to begin a program of trying to encourage this, we could very well wind up with several several smaller homes all over, and these are all over the lower part of Prescott, which is where a lot of people that are older like to live, closer to the river, closer to the downtown, walking in distance. So what I would like to see is a motion, and I'm prepared to make it, that we direct staff to put forth a proposal to get in touch with people that own homes that have one of these 54 spots that I mentioned, to see if they would be interested in severing their lot in a town project to increase the availability of housing in the town, which would not be costing the town virtually anything because the infrastructure is already there. And I would be very happy to move a motion such as that.
Before we do that, you want town staff to talk to the 54 homes that you saw on your walk,
Not necessarily.
that you know of, that could possibly sever their lots.
No, our strategic plan actually deals with this. And I suggest that staff do this in conjunction with a developer. What I'm suggesting is town staff do this, not in conjunction with a developer, but do it so that it directly relates to the people that already own the property. So this is something that would go out to people. They could then be contacted after a certain period of time to see whether they're interested, to see whether they want to discuss it. We could either do it in-house, or we could partner with a real estate firm, a construction company, or companies that would be interested in doing this. Because let's face it, if we have a builder that owns a big chunk of property in town, it's going to cost millions of dollars to build homes, and he's not doing it because he doesn't have the millions of dollars, would he be interested in building several dozen houses if he didn't have to do that? All he had to do was dig a hole and proceed. I think it would be a program that could bear very good fruit for this town at very little cost.
Except for staff time.
We have staff, we pay them to do stuff.
With staff? Okay.
It's in our
I
strategic
understand.
plan.
There were some questions, Councillor,
Yeah, through you.
and then Councillor Burton.
I understand what you're saying, but I can tell you, if I was a homeowner and had a chunk of property and somebody approached me either by mail or phone, I would think, is this another scam? There's so many scams going out that if we're going to do anything like that, first of all, I think we need to wait till we get some of these other studies done and out. And I would think on the particular property, it could go out with their taxes, so they know it's legitimately coming from the town. Because if anybody phones somebody, or if anybody, personally, I'd be very nervous if somebody approached me, do you want to sell that part of your property and put a granny suite or a tiny home? I'd be nervous.
That's why I suggested that the town, if I may, the town put this package together. It would be on town stationery with the town symbol, come in an envelope from the town, and where it goes from there, we would decide.
Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Mayor Shankar. I will not be supporting this. People buy houses with bigger lots because they want the bigger lot. They might have a couple dogs. It's just like people who buy houses on dead-end streets because they like dead-end streets, right? So to me, knocking on people's door or staff time to see if somebody's interested in severing their lot, they bought that lot for a reason, because they wanted more space. They might have a big family, and you're knocking on people's doors or sending them information. No, I think it's a bad idea. Thank you.
May I respond to that?
Are we gonna respond to each one of them? Can we how about we let everyone have a chance?
That's fine. Sure.
Councillor Kirkby.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Shankar. I think I get where Councillor McConnell's coming from. The one thing I will say is I attended the affordable housing information session in Maitland, and I know some other councillors attended it in Maitland and Prescott. I mean, a lot of what you're saying was kind of covered in these information sessions. Severance of the property. If there was a little bit of talk of that, right? I mean, currently you can pretty much take one home and make it three under the Build Homes Faster in Ontario, as long as you meet the criteria. I did the same thing as you have. And I mean, honestly, the block behind us, I grew up on Henry. You could take out two homes, one at each end, and probably run a street right through it and put more homes on each side of that street. That's how big them backyards are. So I get what you're saying. When I did the drive around and was thinking of this, I'll be honest, what I thought about is some of these small homes on big lots that could be, I mean, some of them are at their end of life. There's no other better way to put it, right? Some of these developers may have an interest in coming in, dropping that home and making a duplex on that same lot, or even a triplex. You know, I don't know if we need staff, but I can see your point where maybe some information that's put out that, you know, kind of describes the process of severance in conjunction with the Build Homes Faster sessions that I attended. I don't know if you did, but you know, some of that information could all be combined, because honestly, there's a lot of homes when I did the drive around that I thought, yeah, that lot there, you know, the house sitting on it is in fairly rough shape. And I could see a developer coming and taking that down and putting two houses there, or a duplex or a triplex. Infill is probably the only way to grow residential below the tracks for a majority of the area without doing apartments or condos, right? And so I get where you're coming from, just to be clear. I wonder if, you know, I know we had the information session, affordable housing, it went on in Prescott. I think it went on in Cardinal first and then Prescott, then Maitland, and maybe in Brockville. Maybe, you know, some of that combined information on our social media and stuff like that went out to all of our residents, and just explaining maybe just a couple bullet points of this process exists. And right now there is a push to build homes faster, right? And I don't know how we would approach a developer to say, you know, here's the houses, but, and I'm talking loose here, but you know, if we had a list of potential developers or people that were into buying these kind of homes and repurposing them with duplexes, maybe that would be something that we could include. I mean, we've had two of them. I think it's the Molten Group that has done two in Prescott. Am I right with that name? Mulder, sorry. So the one on West and the one on Churchill, you know, I think that kind of stuff is going to happen. Anyways, just to put my spin on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell?
Through you, I agree with Councillor Kirkby about more of a general, rather than talking to 54 homes, just put out a general communique, whatever, that this is a possibility. Have you ever thought of doing this? But I'd also like to add that if we could have some kind of funding program like the CIP, because to sever your property, it costs over $1,000 plus probably 5,000 to get a survey. So if there would be some kind of encouragement program as we're doing with the CIP, then maybe that would get more people on board.
If I may? So,
Sure.
I kind of had the same thought as you, just to be clear. So I asked this question. If I may, or do you want to speak to it? So I asked Matthew this question, and actually it wasn't that bad. I'm trying to look for my email now, but I believe it was $250.
Not created, it's 250.
And that included the survey, did it not?
No. So, and don't exactly know how much a survey would be, and it really depended on the size of the lot. But yeah, so from our perspective, or from our cost side, it's $250 that goes to the town. In terms of the survey amount, we're not sure how much that is, but I'm guessing at least 2,000, somewhere in there.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Did you want to?
Yeah, I just want to respond to what Leanne mentioned. A lot of people want a house with a big lot, you're right. But to the point, my point is not that everybody on here is going to want to split their lot off. And quite frankly, I did not include several houses with big lots that I just knew would not want to split them off. But the property that I mentioned on Dibble Street West, that's a property that was just purchased within the last year, and those people are splitting a lot off of it. So whether they bought it with that intention or not, I don't know. But that thought is still there. And if I could, Mayor Shankar, I would just like to read a very short portion of this. It's from the first paragraph. There are 6 strategies that we have determined that are essential in our strategic plan to achieving the goal of significant housing development. They are explore a range of housing explore a range of housing options and intensification, implement zoning changes to facilitate and support an increase in density, engage with vacant and underutilized property owners zoned for residential use, create and distribute a development opportunities package to prospective residential builders. Those are all part of our strategic plan, which we all voted to approve. All of those things are encompassed in what I'm suggesting.
Okay. All right. So why don't we,
You have,
have an idea, just why don't we like sit on this for a couple of weeks? And I don't feel comfortable with approaching homes to say, hey, you've got a nice big lot here. Let's see if we can sever it. I'm more of the approach of like, we've got this information out there. It's online. It's available to the public. If John's watching this and says, hey, honey, why don't we do this? And then they can call us.
And that's why we get 1 or 2 a year.
Well, that's all that wants to do it then. Right? But it's out there. We're having these tiny home meetings all across the area. It's in the media every day about intensification and building more homes. I mean, we had 30 people here 2 months ago telling us we didn't need homes in town.
We probably already had homes.
Now we're at home. So, Councillor Kirkby?
sorry, through you, Mayor Shankar, this is something that we could share as a councillor on social media about these options that are available, right? You know, of severance of land, to build homes faster. You know, I don't think it's a bad thing maybe to share it, even from a town perspective, to put more light on it, because I agree with you. That's why we probably only get 2 or 3. There's probably a good number of people out there that would love to do it, but just have no knowledge and maybe know how, where to go. So maybe a little public information campaign, maybe if we sit on it for a while, we can come up with something a little better.
Very good. Matthew?
So I think, along those lines, we'd be happy to kind of come up with something talking about the additional residential units, as well as, do you own a big property and want to learn how you can sever it? Call here. There's a couple of things that are also in the strategic plan. So anything that we do in terms of a severance would have to abide by the current zoning bylaw. That could be problematic for some lots being able to get the necessary frontage and setbacks. So I think it's a part of a multi-pronged approach where, so our intention is to go out and work with a planner and say, here's all the intensification options, here's all the housing options that are possible. And then we bring that back to council, and that will help inform the zoning bylaw. When we're reviewing the zoning bylaw, we'll have the discussion at council and with the planning advisory committee to say, okay, so how big does the frontage need to be? Does it need to be 35 feet? Does it need to be 50 feet? If you're building a single family home, is it this? If you're building a semi, is it this? And all of those types of discussions. And what I think I'm hearing is that, looking to maximize the number of houses by perhaps decreasing that frontage, while still maintaining decent setbacks and those types of things. So I think what we can do now is create that information education series that we can put on social media. We can include in the newsletter. We can include in our July billing or June billing for taxes, to be able to say, have you ever thought about adding additional residential unit or severing part of your land? Here's some information. This is where you go, and this is who you talk to. But then it's also incumbent upon us to change those policies, and that's part of a larger project and conversation to be able to say, how do we fit more in when we're trying to fit them in between two houses? Because maybe now it calls for 50 feet, but maybe we could do it in 40, and maybe that would allow some to move forward where others wouldn't. So that would be my suggestion, is that we absolutely get the information out now. We include it in the tax bills, but we also keep in mind what we want to achieve in the new zoning bylaw to be able to facilitate infill.
That's a good option.
Those are good. Does that sound good to you?
Both what Justin said and what Matthew said make perfect sense and are right in line with what I would like to see. Going back a couple of reports here, in this particular case, you mentioned some of those lots between Henry and Dibble are very long, and it's the same with a lot of lots. And going into Augusta Township, are they really going to want lots with that deep a backyard to line up with our streets? I know that's a little off topic, but the odds are with the intensification that is suggested in that plan, and there is it's not going to line up anyway, because they're going to have smaller lots with more dense housing on them. But what Matthew suggested is right in line what I would like. I would like to see something developed by staff that could be put in with the tax bill, that we could put on our website. The more people that we make aware of this, the more people they're going to think, maybe, and the more that it's done, the more people hopefully will want to do it. And the zoning bylaw, as far as the amount of frontage, the amount of depths, there is no need for a 50 by 100-foot lot if you're only putting a 2-bedroom house without a garage on it. It's a total waste of space. So there's no reason why some of these potential lots that I've identified that are smaller than that would take a smaller house couldn't be accommodated. But we definitely have to look at the zoning bylaws. And I don't know if we could just make everything smaller, but there should be some way that we relate the size of the house to the amount of space that's occupiable on a lot. Thank you.
Okay. All right, we're gonna move on. We still have a bit to go here. So there are no notice of the motion tonight, and there's two proclamations as well as I'm told it's National Volunteer Week. So I'm gonna read the two proclamations. The first one is Emergency Preparedness Week. Whereas Emergency Preparedness Week is a national awareness initiative that has taken place since 1996. It is a collaborative event undertaken by provincial and territorial emergency management organizations, supporting activities at the local level in concert with Public Safety Canada and partners. And whereas the town of Prescott recognizes the importance of emergency management in Ontario, and whereas the goal of Emergency Preparedness Week is to increase awareness of individual, family, and community preparedness for the possibility of an emergency, with this year's theme, Plan for Every Season. And whereas Emergency Preparedness Week encourages everyone to take simple steps to become better prepared and remain safe when facing a range of emergencies, know the risk, make a plan, get an emergency kit, and whereas the safety of our community is the responsibility of each and every one of us, we must prepare and practice now and learn how to secure a strong and healthy tomorrow. Therefore, the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Prescott does hereby proclaim the week of May 5th to 11th, 2024 to be Emergency Preparedness Week and encourages all citizens to participate in educational activities on emergency preparedness. Dated this day, 15th of April, 2024. Second proclamation is National Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, Girls, and Two-Spirit People, May 5th, 2024. Whereas in Canada, May 5th marks the National Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, Girls, and Two-Spirit People, and whereas this day coincides with Red Dress Day, which was inspired by an art project by Jamie Black, a Métis woman who used empty red dresses to evoke the missing women and girls. And whereas on Red Dress Day, people are encouraged to wear red or display red clothing to honor and remember missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit family and friends. And whereas First Nations women continue to experience staggering rates of violence as well as ongoing oppression and sex discrimination, and whereas Indigenous women and girls have the right to be safe in their communities wherever they live. And whereas on National Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, Girls, Two-Spirit People, we remember the Indigenous people who we have lost to murder and those who remain missing, and are committed to working to ensure any instance of a missing or murdered person is met with swift and effective action. Therefore, the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Prescott does hereby proclaim May 5th, 2024 as National Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, Girls, and Two-Spirit People throughout the Town of Prescott. Dated this day, 15th of April, 2024. All right, Matthew, any media questions? None? All right, 19 is closed session. So council is going to move into closed session at 8:12 p.m. to discuss matters pertaining to approval of closed session minutes and an identifiable individual. Under section 239(2)(c) of the Municipal Act, a proposed or pending acquisition of or disposition of land by the municipality or local board, and that the CAO, treasurer, clerk, economic development officer remain in the room. Mover and seconder, please. Kirkby and Campbell. All in favor?
Great. Campbell.
Thank you.
AC.
Give us a few minutes and we'll get back.